The first time it happened, I honestly thought I was imagining it. It was just after midnight, that quiet stretch of time when the city feels like it's holding its breath. I was brushing my teeth, half asleep, staring at my own reflection like I didn't quite recognize the guy looking back. Same apartment, same tired eyes, same life I lived every day. But something was different at night. Not me exactly. Us. During the day, we barely existed to each other. I was Adrian from accounting, polite, efficient, invisible in meetings, unless someone needed a spreadsheet fixed. I wore button-downs, drank burnt office coffee, nodded at my boss like I believed in the corporate ladder. I had a version of myself that fit neatly into daylight hours, one that didn't ask for too much. And he was Derek. During the day, Derek was all sharp edges and clean lines. Project manager, confident, straight-backed, always walking too fast, always on his phone, always acting like he had somewhere more important to be. He wore that role well, professional, untouchable, mildly intimidating in a way people respected. We shared an apartment, but that was it. Two men passing each other in hallways. Hey, bills paid on time, dishes done separately, no overlap. If anyone had asked me during daylight hours what Derek meant to me, I'd have shrugged and said, roommate, nothing more. But nights didn't care about labels. That night, I was padding down the hallway in socks, the apartment lit only by the glow from the street lamps outside. The clock on the oven read 12:17 a.m. I remember it clearly because something in my chest tightened when I saw it, like my body already knew what my brain was trying to deny. Derek's door was cracked open. That wasn't unusual on its own. What was unusual was the light. Soft, warm, not the harsh, white overhead bulb he used in the mornings. This was lamplight. Intentional light. I slowed without meaning to. I told myself I was just being curious, that I was allowed to walk past my own roommate's room, that it didn't mean anything. Still, my steps got quieter as I reached his door. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, elbows resting on his knees, head tilted down like he was thinking hard about something. His hair was loose, not styled the way it was for work, and he wore a worn-out t-shirt I'd never seen him wear during the day. Gray. Soft. Familiar in a way that made my stomach flip. He looked up. Our eyes met. For a second, neither of us moved. No pretending. No roles. Just two men standing in the middle of something unspoken. "You're up late," he said. His voice was different at night. Lower. Less guarded. "So are you," I replied, my own voice sounding thinner than I wanted. He nodded, like he'd expected that answer. Like this wasn't the first time we'd circled each other after dark. He glanced at the clock on his phone, then back at me. "Couldn't sleep," he said. Same. I stepped closer without asking. Just one step. He didn't tell me to stop. That was the thing about nights. There were no rules written yet. During the day, we were men with responsibilities, reputations, expectations. During the day, Derek never looked at me for longer than a second. During the day, I never let myself imagine what his hands might feel like. But at night, something loosened, like the versions of ourselves we carried around got tired and slipped off. "You okay?" he asked. It was such a simple question. One people asked all the time. But the way he said it, quiet, almost careful, made it feel heavier. I shrugged. "Yeah, just restless." He exhaled, a small sound that felt like relief. "Yeah, me too." Another pause. Thick, charged. This was the part that always scared me in retrospect. The way it felt natural. Not dramatic, not explosive. Just inevitable. He shifted on the bed, creating space beside him. Didn't say a word. Didn't look away either. My heart started pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. During the day, I would have laughed it off, made a joke, gone back to my room and buried the moment under emails and spreadsheets. But it was night. I sat down. We didn't touch. Not at first. We just sat there, close enough that our knees almost brushed, the air between us warm and electric. I could smell his soap. Something clean. Something familiar. My body reacted before my mind caught up, and that scared me more than anything. "Funny," he said quietly. "What?" "How different things feel after midnight." I swallowed. Yeah. I wanted to ask him what he meant. I wanted him to say it first. We were both cowards in that way. He turned his head slightly, just enough to look at me properly. Really look. Not like a roommate. Not like a colleague passing in a hallway. Like someone who'd been waiting. "Adrian," he said, and the way he said my name made my chest ache. That was the moment I realized this wasn't a one-time thing. It wasn't an accident or insomnia or bad boundaries. This was a second life we were building in the dark. By day, we were strangers who shared rent. By night, we were something else entirely, and neither of us knew how to stop it. After that night, something shifted so quietly, it almost scared me more than if it had been loud. Nothing happened the next morning. That was the strange part. Sunlight filled the kitchen like it always did. The coffee machine gurgled. The fridge hummed. I stood there in my socks, pouring cereal, half expecting the universe to acknowledge what had happened. It didn't. Derek walked in, wearing a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled just enough to look intentional. Hair styled. Jaw set. Daytime Derek. He nodded once when he saw me. "Morning, morning." That was it. No hesitation, no lingering look, no sign that, just hours earlier, we'd sat shoulder to shoulder in his bedroom at 1 a.m, breathing the same air like it meant something. I told myself I'd imagined the intensity, that I'd read too much into it, that whatever lived between us only existed because it was dark and quiet and we were tired. Still, I watched him when he wasn't looking. He moved the same as always, efficient, controlled. He checked his phone, grabbed his keys, reminded me rent was due next week like he hadn't whispered my name the night before. When the door closed behind him, the apartment felt emptier than usual. That's when I realized the nights weren't accidents. They became a pattern. Not every night. Never predictable. But often enough that my body learned to expect them. After midnight, one of us would linger in the shared space a little longer. A light would be on where it didn't need to be. A door would be left open. Sometimes we talked, really talked, about things that never came up during the day. Childhood stuff, regrets, the quiet fears that crept in when no one else was around. Derek talked about pressure, how everyone expected him to be certain, confident, unshakable, how exhausting that was. I told him about how invisible I felt, how I'd learned to be agreeable just to survive, how part of me worried that if I ever took up space, people would leave. He listened, actually listened. Other nights, we didn't talk much at all. We'd sit close on the couch, the TV on low, not really watching. Our knees would touch by accident, and neither of us would move away. His arm would rest along the back of the couch, not around me, but close enough that I felt the heat of him. The tension lived in all the things we didn't do. We never touched in ways that couldn't be explained, never crossed a line that couldn't be walked back in daylight. That was the unspoken rule. Because during the day, we went back to pretending. At work, I'd catch myself thinking about the way his voice softened at night. About how he smiled differently when no one was watching. I hated how much I wanted those versions of him. I hated how much I wanted to be seen the way he saw me after midnight. One night, weeks in, the air felt heavier than usual. A storm rolled in, rain tapping against the windows, thunder low and distant. I was sitting on the couch, lights off, just listening. Derek came out of his room without saying anything and sat down beside me, closer than usual. "You ever feel like you're two different people?" he asked. I didn't pretend to think about it. "All the time." He nodded slowly. "Day me knows exactly what he's doing. Night me." He exhaled. "Night me asks questions I don't have answers to." I turned toward him. Our faces were close enough that I could see the tension in his jaw, the uncertainty he worked so hard to hide. "Night, you seems more honest," I said. His eyes flicked to mine. "That scares the hell out of me," he admitted. Something cracked open in my chest then. Because I knew that fear. I lived in it. Thunder rolled again, louder this time, and without thinking, I reached out. Just barely, my fingers brushed his wrist. He froze. Didn't pull away. Didn't lean in either. We stayed like that, my hand resting against him, the contact so light it felt unreal. But it was enough. It said what neither of us could. This wasn't just comfort. This wasn't just loneliness. This was a connection that only existed when the world went quiet. Eventually, he covered my hand with his own, still not gripping, just there. "If we do this," he said softly, "we can't do it halfway." I swallowed. I know, but neither of us moved. Because stepping fully into it meant facing what happened when the sun came up. And daylight had a way of undoing everything we built in the dark. Still, when I finally stood to go back to my room, he didn't let go right away. And that small delay felt like a promise neither of us was ready to keep, but neither of us wanted to break. The next few days were harder than I expected, not because anything bad happened, but because nothing did. Daylight kept winning. Derek was back to being composed, efficient, almost distant. Not cold, just sealed. Like whatever door cracked open at night had been carefully shut and locked again by morning. We still shared the same space, the same routine. But there was a new tension under everything, like we were both pretending not to feel a bruise. I caught myself waiting for night the way some people wait for weekends. I hated that. I hated how much my body remembered him. His warmth, the weight of his hand over mine, the way his voice softened when he said my name like it meant something different after midnight. The next time it happened, it was accidental. At least, that's what we told ourselves. I'd fallen asleep on the couch with a book on my chest, the lamp still on. I woke up disoriented, the room quiet except for the rain tapping softly against the windows again. The apartment clock glowed 1:42 a.m. Derek was standing there, not looming, just there, like he'd been debating whether to wake me. "Sorry," he said quietly. "Didn't mean to." I sat up, rubbing my face. "It's fine." He hesitated. That hesitation said more than any confession could. "Couldn't sleep," he added, like it was an explanation we'd both accepted by now. I shifted to make room on the couch, my heart already racing. He sat down, leaving a careful inch between us. We were both learning how dangerous closeness was and how impossible it felt to avoid. For a while, we just listened to the rain. "You ever think about what happens if this stops?" he asked suddenly. I turned to look at him. His eyes were darker at night, less guarded, more real. "Yeah," I said honestly. "I think about what happens if it doesn't." He let out a quiet breath, almost a laugh. "That's worse, isn't it?" I nodded. Because if it didn't stop, eventually we'd have to choose. And choices meant consequences. Labels. Explanations. Daylight. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "I've spent my whole life being what people expect. Son. Manager. Straight guy who has it together." He paused. "I don't know what to do with the part of me that only shows up at night." I swallowed. "I know exactly what to do with mine." "I hide it." He turned his head, really looking at me. "You shouldn't have to." Something inside me broke open then. Before I could stop myself, I said, "Then why do we only exist like this in the dark?" The question hung between us. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached out, slow, deliberate, and rested his fingers against mine. Not gripping, not pulling, just touching. "Because daylight asks questions I'm not ready to answer," he said quietly. My throat tightened. "And night doesn't?" He met my eyes. "Night lets me feel first." The room felt impossibly small. This time, when our fingers laced together, it wasn't tentative. It was intentional. A choice. He leaned in, Not all the way, just enough that our foreheads nearly touched. I could feel his breath. I could feel how badly he was holding back. "Tell me to stop," he murmured. I didn't. Instead, I whispered, "Tell me you don't want this." He closed his eyes. "I can't." That was as far as we went. No rush, no crossing lines we couldn't uncross, just closeness. Heat. The weight of wanting something that felt both terrifying and right. When we finally pulled apart, the silence wasn't awkward. It was heavy with understanding. From then on, the nights changed. They grew bolder, longer. We sat closer. We touched more, hands, arms, shoulders. Intimacy built in glances and pauses, not actions. We learned each other's tells. The way he went quiet when he was overwhelmed. The way I filled space when I was nervous. And every morning, we reset. Day, Derek. Night, Derek. Day, Adrian. Night, Adrian. Two lives running parallel. But something had shifted. Because now, even in daylight, our eyes lingered just a second longer. Our conversations felt loaded. And sometimes, very rarely, his hand would brush mine in the kitchen, just enough to remind me the night version of him was still there, waiting. And I knew, deep down, this couldn't stay hidden forever. Night had given us something real. Sooner or later, daylight was going to demand its share. The first crack showed up in the smallest way. It was a Thursday morning. Ordinary. Harmless. The kind of day that usually passed without leaving a mark. I was standing at the kitchen counter, tying my shoes, mentally running through a list of things I needed to get done at work. Derek was at the stove, scrambling eggs like he always did. Precise, efficient, headphones in, already halfway into his day persona. Then his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and frowned before answering. "Hey," he said. His tone shifted instantly. Professional, upbeat, day Derek fully online. I wasn't trying to listen. I really wasn't. But apartments aren't built for secrets. "Yeah, I can do tonight," he continued. "No, it's fine. I've got nothing going on." Something tightened in my chest at that. Nothing going on. I grabbed my bag, told myself I was being ridiculous. He didn't owe me explanations. We hadn't named anything. Nights didn't come with contracts. Still, when he hung up, I looked at him. "Late night?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He paused for half a beat, just long enough for me to notice. "Work thing. Dinner with a client." I nodded. "Cool." Our eyes met, and for a second, something passed between us. Guilt? Regret? Maybe I imagined it. That night, the apartment stayed quiet. No lights left on. No open doors. No soft footsteps in the hallway. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the clock ticking louder than it ever had. Midnight passed. 1 a.m. came and went. The silence felt heavier than any argument would have. When Derek finally came home, it was close to 2. I heard his keys, his jacket, his bedroom door closing. He didn't come out again. The next morning, everything felt off. We moved around each other carefully, like strangers again. He looked tired. Not the soft, undone kind of tired he wore at night, but drained. Closed off. I almost asked if he was okay. I didn't. Daylight won that round. The distance didn't last long, though. It never did. The following night, I found him on the balcony, leaning against the railing, city lights painting his face in gold and shadow. He didn't turn when I stepped outside, but I knew he felt me there. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. I leaned beside him. "For what?" "For pretending this doesn't matter during the day." The honesty caught me off guard. "I get it," I said. And I did. That didn't mean it didn't hurt. He ran a hand through his hair, restless. "I keep thinking I can compartmentalize it. Night me here, day me there." He looked at me then. "But it's bleeding through." My heart skipped. "Is that a bad thing?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he asked, If someone from work saw us like this, really saw us, would you be okay? The question landed hard. I thought about it. About fear. About relief. About how tired I was of pretending to be smaller than I was. I think I'd be scared, I said honestly. But I'd also be relieved. He nodded slowly, like that confirmed something he'd been wrestling with. That was the night he kissed me. Not rushed, not desperate. Just inevitable. He turned toward me, hesitated once, and then leaned in. His lips brushed mine like he was testing reality, like he needed to know if it felt as real as it had in his head. It did. When we pulled back, his forehead rested against mine. "We can't keep pretending this only exists after midnight," he said. My chest tightened, not with fear this time, but with something steadier. "Then don't." The problem wasn't the nights anymore. It was the mornings. Because once you let something real in, even daylight can't fully erase it. And the world was going to notice, whether we were ready or not. Once the kiss happened, everything changed, and nothing did. That was the cruel part. The next morning, sunlight poured into the kitchen like it always had, the same kettle, the same counter clutter, the same quiet routine. But now there was a memory pressed between us, warm and undeniable, like a hand resting at the small of my back even when we weren't touching. Derek stood at the sink, sleeves rolled up, jaw tense. I could tell he was already back in his head, reorganizing himself for the day. Building walls. "Coffee?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. Our fingers brushed when he passed me the mug. Not an accident. Not entirely intentional either. Just enough to remind us that last night hadn't been a dream. We didn't talk about the kiss. Not then. We both knew better. Daylight still demanded discipline. But the pretending was thinner now. At work, I couldn't focus. Every spreadsheet blurred into thoughts of him. How careful he'd been. How certain. How different it felt from anything I'd let myself want before. I kept checking my phone like an idiot, half hoping for a message, half terrified of what it would mean if one came. It didn't. That night, though, he was waiting. I found him sitting on the floor of his room, back against the bed, shoes kicked off, tie undone. He looked tired in a way that wasn't just physical. "Long day?" I asked, leaning in the doorway. He nodded. Long pretending. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. That simple action felt like crossing a line and claiming one. He looked up at me then, really looked. "I almost backed out today," he admitted. "Told myself last night was just a moment." "And?" I asked softly. And I hated myself for even thinking that. I sat down beside him, our shoulders touching. "You don't have to have all the answers right now." He let his head fall back against the bed. "I know. I just wish the world would stop asking the questions." I understood that too well. That night, we didn't rush anything. We talked. We laughed quietly. We lay side by side on his bed, staring at the ceiling, sharing the kind of closeness that didn't need proving. His hand found mine, fingers lacing together like it had always known where to go. "I don't know what this makes me," he said at one point. I squeezed his hand. "It makes you honest." That answer seemed to settle something in him. The real test came a few days later. We ran into one of his coworkers at the grocery store. Someone loud, friendly, oblivious. She joked about his mystery dating life, nudged him playfully, asked if I was his brother. The word hit harder than I expected. Derek laughed it off easily. "Just my roommate." Roommate. I smiled, nodded, played my role. But something inside me shrank. That night, when the apartment went quiet, I didn't go to him right away. He came to me. Sat on the edge of my bed, careful, uncertain. "I saw your face earlier," he said. I looked away. "It's fine." He didn't accept that. It's not. Silence stretched between us, thick and honest. I don't want to be a secret forever, I said finally. My voice didn't shake, but my hands did. I can live in the in-between for a while. I can live in nights, but not if days erase me. He took that in, really took it in. I don't want that either, he said quietly. I'm just scared. I met his eyes. So am I. He leaned in then, pressing his forehead to mine. Maybe daylight doesn't have to know everything yet, but I don't want it to lie. That was the closest thing to a promise we'd made, and for the first time it felt like night wasn't just an escape anymore. It was a beginning. After that conversation, something settled between us. Not certainty, not confidence, but intention. We stopped pretending the nights were accidents. Nothing about our living situation changed on the surface. Same routines, same polite distance when other people were around, same careful choreography during the day. But beneath it, there was an understanding now. Quiet, steady, impossible to ignore. At night, Derek didn't hover in doorways anymore. He knocked, softly, like he was asking permission. I always opened the door. Those nights weren't about heat or urgency. They were about closeness that felt earned. We'd lie side by side, sometimes talking, sometimes just listening to each other breathe. His arm around me felt natural in a way that made me wonder how I'd ever convinced myself I didn't need this kind of touch. One night, he admitted something he'd never said out loud. I've dated women because it was easy, he said, staring at the ceiling, not because it felt like this. I didn't ask him to explain. I didn't need to. The weight of the words said enough. Still, daylight kept testing us. A comment from a coworker. A family phone call he took in the other room, the way he'd straighten up when we were out in public together, slipping back into that familiar armor. I told myself to be patient. He was unlearning a lifetime of expectations. I didn't want to be another thing, demanding answers before he was ready. But patience doesn't mean silence. The turning point came on a Sunday afternoon. We were supposed to be doing nothing. Laundry, takeout, background noise on the TV. One of those rare, shared days off. Halfway through folding clothes, Derek froze, staring at his phone. What's wrong? I asked. He hesitated, then showed me the screen. A text from a coworker inviting him to a small dinner party. Casual, friendly. +1 welcome. +1. He watched my face carefully, like he was bracing for disappointment. I don't know why I'm panicking, he said. It's just dinner. I folded a shirt slowly, because it's the first time daylight asked you to choose. That landed. He sat down on the edge of the bed, phone forgotten in his hand. I don't want to hide you. My chest tightened. Then don't. But I don't want to rush either, he added quickly. I don't want to make you feel like an experiment. I moved closer, kneeling in front of him so he had to look at me. I don't need a grand gesture. I just need honesty. He searched my face, then nodded once, like he'd made up his mind. I'm not ready to introduce you as anything yet, he said carefully, but I don't want to pretend you're nothing. I considered that. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Then go, I said, and tell them the truth you can tell. He frowned. Which is? That you're seeing someone, I said. That it matters. That's enough for now. That night, when he came home, he didn't say anything at first. He just pulled me into a hug, tight, grounding, different from our nighttime closeness. This one felt public, even though no one was watching. I told them, he murmured into my shoulder. I said I'm dating someone. Didn't specify. Didn't lie. I smiled against his chest. How did that feel? He laughed softly. Terrifying and good. That was the first time daylight didn't erase us. It didn't define us either, but it acknowledged us. And somehow, that felt like the most important step yet. Because now, when night fell, it wasn't just an escape. It was where we planned a future neither of us had dared to imagine before. The strange thing was how normal it all started to feel. Not easy, not simple, just real. Derek began letting small truths slip into the day. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would set off alarms. but enough that I noticed. He stopped flinching when I stood close to him in public spaces. His hand lingered at my lower back once when we were crossing the street, guiding me through traffic like it was instinct. When someone asked if he lived alone, he said, "No, with my partner," then quickly added, "roommate," correcting himself out of habit. He didn't meet my eyes after that. That night, I found him sitting on the edge of the bed again, staring at nothing. "I didn't hate it," he said before I could even ask. "Didn't hate what?" "Saying it," he admitted, "even by accident." I sat beside him. "That scares you." "Yeah," he said, "because once you stop hating it, you start wanting more." I rested my head on his shoulder. Wanting more doesn't mean demanding everything at once. He leaned his head against mine. "You're good at this." "At what?" "Letting things grow instead of forcing them." I smiled. "That's new." But it wasn't entirely true. I just learned, the hard way, that forcing people to be ready never worked. What mattered was whether they were moving toward you or away, and Derek was moving toward me. The real test came when his sister visited. She was warm, sharp-eyed, observant in a way that made me nervous the moment she walked in. The kind of person who noticed silences, who paid attention to how people stood next to each other. We played our parts well, friendly, casual, comfortable. Too comfortable, maybe. At dinner, she watched us the way people do when they sense something without having proof. "So," she said lightly, sipping her wine, "how long have you two been living together?" "Almost a year," Derek answered. She smiled. "And still not sick of each other?" I laughed before I could stop myself. Derek glanced at me, then back at her. "Somehow, no," he said. Later, while she was in the shower, Derek leaned against the counter, rubbing his face. "She knows," he muttered. I raised an eyebrow. "Does she?" "She always does," he said. Then, after a pause, "And I didn't lie." That mattered more than he realized. That night, when the apartment was quiet again, he pulled me close. Not rushed, not desperate, just certain. "I don't want to live two lives forever," he said into my hair. "I just need time to figure out how to merge them." I held him tighter. "I'm not going anywhere." He exhaled like he'd been holding that breath for months. For the first time since all of this started, I wasn't waiting for night to give me permission to exist. Daylight hadn't caught up yet, but it was no longer the enemy. And that made all the difference. The first time daylight really saw us, it wasn't dramatic. No confrontation, no announcement, no sudden shift where everything clicked neatly into place. It was just a moment. We were at a small cafe near our apartment, the kind with mismatched chairs and chipped mugs. Derek liked it because no one from work ever went there. I liked it because it felt anonymous in the best way. We sat across from each other, knees almost touching under the table. He was mid-sentence, telling me about a project that had gone sideways, when he reached for his coffee and his hand landed over mine. Not a brush. Not an accident. A hold. He froze. I felt it. The split second where he realized what he'd done, where the old instincts kicked in. I waited for him to pull away. He didn't. Instead, he looked around. The room was quiet. A couple arguing softly near the window. Someone typing on a laptop. No one paying attention to us. He laced his fingers with mine under the table. My heart slammed so hard I thought I might laugh or cry. Maybe both. "You okay?" I asked softly. He nodded, eyes steady. "Yeah." That was it. That was the moment. Nothing exploded. The world didn't stop. But something inside him, inside us, finally aligned. After that, things didn't magically become easy. Some days were still awkward. Some mornings he still hesitated before introducing me to people. There were conversations he wasn't ready for yet, names he hadn't spoken out loud. But there were also small, brave things. He stopped correcting himself when he said "we." He introduced me to his sister as someone important to me, and she smiled like she'd been waiting for that sentence all along. He kissed me goodbye once in the hallway when he thought no one was looking, and didn't panic when someone walked past anyway. And the nights, They changed too. They stopped being a hiding place. We still loved the quiet, the softness, the way the world felt smaller and safer after midnight. But now, night wasn't where we became real. It was where we rested. One night, weeks later, we lay in bed, the window cracked open, city sounds drifting in. Derek traced lazy circles on my arm, thoughtful. "You know," he said, "I used to think night was the only time I was honest." I turned my head to look at him. "And now?" He smiled. Not nervous, not guarded, just content. "Now I think night just gave me the courage to be honest everywhere else." I rested my head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Steady. Real. We didn't become different people overnight. We didn't shed our fears all at once, but we stopped splitting ourselves in two. Day and night stopped being opposites. They became parts of the same story. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for darkness to feel seen. I was living fully, quietly, honestly, in the light too.